Welcome to the Truth Over Facts podcast. I'm your host Dylan, co-host Ron Dog. What's
What's
up,
up,
bud?
Dylan? How you doing?
Nothing. I got windows motherfucker and I need a drink.
Yeah.
And I'm all out of alcohol.
Well,
Think I'm
that
gonna
sucks.
start
You're all
making
dried up.
the way the economy's going. I think we'll have to start making some prison hooch and shit.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so it's been a while since we last talked.
Yeah, a lot
Um,
more crap has happened. But like we said before, it's just one big giant like revolving like shit NATO, and it just doesn't. We're gonna be moving from crisis to crisis.
mm-hmm.
Not so. How do we solve this problem? We
Yep.
create two bigger problems.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of like telling a guy at work today and shit, like all the problems at work. It kind of reminds me of the movie Major Pain and shit, where the dude gets shot in the arm and he's just, oh, I'm shot. I'm shot. Oh, you want me to show you a little trick to take your mind off that pain? And just snaps
Mm-hmm.
his finger.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the government's trying to do right now. Oh, inflation's killing your ass. Oh, your wages aren't keeping up.
Yep. And then on
Ukraine is falling apart. Let me break your legs.
the dollar's worth about 87 cents right now, and
Right.
China and Russia are trade
Teaming up with
partners,
fucking
along with
gangbanging us.
France is buying LNG in the exchange rate of Yuan.
Yep, I heard
And
about
then
that.
Brazil and China are also trading at the exchange rate of Yuan as well.
Yeah, because essentially this comes down to the Belt and Road Initiative, where the Belt and Road Initiative is where China and Russia are centrally linking up through their infrastructure, their railroads, their speed trains, their shipping and shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's cutting off a bunch of time to transport goods, and this is all primarily what happens before war. China's been getting ready for war with us for years because
Yeah.
we're America. We don't ever pay our bills. We do nothing but fucking screw everybody over, and we try to be the world police.
Yeah. So it seems like these, like these trade agreements and alliances, it seems like China and Russia are getting all of their ducks in a row
Yeah.
because Ukraine has the backing of Western Europe and America, and now China and Russia are getting together, and now they're getting the Middle East together.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the big players in the Middle
Well,
East,
they
so
call it
like
the
Saudi
BRICS nation, I
Arabia,
believe. The
yeah, the
BRICS.
BRICS nation, yeah. So even Iran is also, I believe Iran and Saudi Arabia are going to be working together as well with the
Right, and that's a
distribution of
big
oil.
one because Iran and Saudi Arabia don't fucking like each other.
Exactly.
But that's where it's kind of where we've kind of talked on this point before, where the enemy of my enemy is my friend,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of like was it Shang Tsung from or Shang
Shang,
Tzu,
Shang, Shang,
Liu
Shang,
Kang from
Shang,
Mortal Kombat
yeah,
War.
Shang Shi,
Yeah,
Shang-Chi.
Raiden from the Art of War,
Yeah.
where he says like if your opponent is bigger than you, evade him until he becomes weak.
Mm-hmm.
You know, attack him when he's resting or some shit like that. That's exactly what China's been doing. They're doing the rope a dope. They are literally doing the same financial tactics that we did to South American countries and did for the last 40 years. It's just the
Yeah.
fact that we
And
ran out
now we're
of
we're
shit.
we're feeling the effects of how the Chinese people feel like when America would go around the country brokering all these peace deals and
Mm-hmm.
peace
Loading these
treaties.
countries up with these third world countries up with debt and then calling in the loans, bankrupting the country. Oh,
Yeah.
we're trying to help you.
And did you, I don't know if you caught this or not, but I believe there was like a president in Kenya or in
I think he
somewhere
was
in
from
Africa.
Zimbabwe, I think.
Yeah, but either way, he was all like, if you do hold American currency, pretty
Get
much
rid of
just
them.
get rid of it, dump it.
Yep. Because essentially we're getting so close to war where, you know, I've always had this kind of like simulation in my head of how this kind of would go and shit. And I always had the predicates of kind of like, I always said like and shit, I got knocked that off. But I've always had this thing where the newest Total Recall movie with Colin Farrell, I think his name is, and Kate Beckinsale, it was made in like 2012 from the guy who did the Underworld movies or something like that. But in that movie, it essentially is a future of what's going on right now, where due to like economic collapses and shit like that in the movie Total Recall,
Mm-hmm.
the Americas link up. Canada, North America, and South America all link up, and they have like one Belt and Road, right, going from
Yeah.
all the Americas, where there are no borders, there are none of that, because we need the population, right? We
Yeah.
need the cheap labor because we're at war. And then in the movie, Europe and Asia team up, and it's called EuroAsia.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way that the system works through like meetings, and because the whole half of the earth is like completely cut off from communication because they're both at war with one another, right? It's like two
Mm-hmm.
corporations are fighting one another, but instead it's the Americas that have linked up and Eurasia that have linked up. And the only way they can communicate and transport goods between each side is like this massive internal train that goes throughout the whole entire earth.
Yeah.
But the what I'm trying to get at is like
Like
this is where,
Snowpiercer.
yeah, like Snowpiercer, but instead of like going on top, it's like directly in the core of the earth kind of shit. And
Yeah.
that's the only way where you can pass through the Eurasia and the Americas.
Mm-hmm.
But this is essentially kind of what is going on is that everybody has the biggest investors of America treasuries, American debt instruments, has been China,
Mm-hmm.
Japan, and Saudi Arabia. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you can only fuck your partners over so many times until they start to say, well, why don't we link up and fuck them over?
Yeah.
That's what's going on right now. So, from like 2017 to now, as soon as Trump got into office, Trump never pays his bills, right?
Mm-hmm.
For 30 or we're at that time we were $20 trillion in debt. China knows that's why China, Russia, they've been hoarding a bunch of gold.
Mm-hmm.
They've been the biggest buyers of gold to a point where like now even banks are trying to buy gold, but they can't get it because the whole entire time China was buying up gold.
Mm-hmm.
Russia was buying up a bunch of Bitcoin and shit too. Same with Russia. I mean, Russia and China were buying up a bunch of Bitcoin. I think I just saw something where I can't remember the exact number, but it was something like 70% of or 80% of all the Bitcoin are held with outside of America.
Yeah.
So it's a global currency, right?
Yeah. So Yuan is the new gold standard.
Yeah, there's a couple of different Asia currencies. I mean, there's a lot of different. There's the yen, which is Japanese. There's the ruble, which is done by Russia. Then there's the yuan, and then there's also the renminbi. And then I forget what India uses. I think India uses rubies. I think they use rubies,
Okay.
but they're all fiat currencies.
Yeah.
So it's a big giant race to the bottom to debase your currency by printing as much money as you can to prop up your economy. But as you do that, printing more and more, it creates a higher two-tiered society. So it eventually
Yeah.
collapses in on it. So it implodes.
Yeah. Well, it's not a three. Yeah. So pretty much America is getting rid of the middle class. They
Right.
are literally going to a two-tier society. You're either rich or you're either poor. There
Yeah,
is no in between.
exactly right. And the same thing happened in the Great Depression.
Mm-hmm.
They expand the credit supply and then they contract it by raising interest rates. Well, there's more dollars than there's more debt than there are actual dollars to pay that debt back. So it's like musical chairs. So like the whole shit just implodes.
Yeah.
It implodes. They print even more money to alleviate the debt stress within the system. And all the countries do this. But at the same time, like you saw this conformity of outside different countries even during the 1930s and 20s because they understood how the banking system was
Yeah.
working. So in the 1930s, when we were in a depression, America was, Europe was in a depression, Germany wasn't, Italy wasn't, because they were fascists. Fascist
Germany had their depression at
in
the
the
end of like world
1910s and
in the
stuff,
yeah, at the end of World War
2020s,
One.
right? Which
Pretty
led,
much when they had the Treaty of Versailles and they had to hand over all their sovereignty to America.
Mhm. We were in
And
a depression for 10 years. And it
yeah.
wasn't until, in my opinion, we allowed Harbor to happen because,
Pearl Harbor sucked and I miss you.
right, like this is kind of like the cycle that we have where we hollow out our country. And then, in order to rapidly rebuild our country, we have to create a war, and it's all hands on deck. You have to gather up all of America's resources to fight this war.
Yeah.
And once we win, everything will be better, kind of thing.
Going back to World War II, see um I did see a clip from what we talked about with Smedley Butler and the veterans that were
Yep.
supposed to get paid for their service,
Yep. And
and
the
they
government
had
just
they
broke
had
it.
a big uprising at the
Yep.
Capitol,
Yep. And the
and
Herbert Hoover at
they
the time,
they think January 6th was that bad.
well, that's
That
just
was pretty bad.
that was horrible. I
Yeah.
think something like 112 Marines got shot
Mhm.
because Herbert Hoover, because they were demanding their pension. Like,
They had sent tanks out into the street after veterans, after World
yeah,
War II veterans.
because the only thing that a government fears most is an uprising from its own people, and not only
Hmm.
its own people, its own military trained people. Why
Yeah.
do you think the Mexican drug cartels, they're all ex-military?
Hmm.
They all conform, even in prison systems. It's a militaristic kind of tactic where it's easy to conform, but at the same time, it's very simple, structured, and there's a hierarchy, a tier system of power within it.
Yeah.
Well, the same thing happened in the 1930s. I mean, I read that book, it was a conspiracy to overthrow FDR. In the 1930s, fascist industrialists in America, like capitalists, they
Yeah.
wanted they didn't like the fact that FDR was trying to help the common person by printing a bunch of money and trying all these weird kind of like what Biden and Trump were doing. Every time there's a crisis, the government gets involved and it just starts
And
screwing
just
shit up.
starts printing more money
Yeah. And
unnecessarily and
yeah,
carelessly.
and the reason why after every time there's a huge serious crash like that and they print all that money is to alleviate the debt. You can still pay your debts off. You're just paying them with devalued currency. Well, we made a promise to the veterans after World War One. If you fight in World War One, we'll pay you in 15 years
Hmm.
because we're at war right now. We got to spend all of our money to fight this war. It's a world war.
Yeah.
This is life or death. Well, guess what? 15 years later, the Great Depression happened. So wait, you made a promise to me. That promise is due, and now you're trying to kick the can down the road another time.
Yeah. Those guys camped out there. They
Yep.
camped out until they got mowed out by the army.
And General Smedley Butler at that time was more famous than the president.
Hmm.
He would go. He wasn't a very rich man. Never cared about money.
He's a
Very
war
simple.
hero.
Yeah. He would go all across the country and talk to veteran soldiers like,
War
"You are a
bonds.
soldier." Yeah. Huh.
War bonds.
Yep. War bonds. Yep. And he would hype people up to still give faith into the system. Like,
Yep.
you're a soldier. You're here to protect both foreign and domestic. And all the soldiers are like, they're all domestic terrorists now. Like, they're all domestic enemies now. They're
Hmm.
destroying the country. They're not helping anybody out. I did my part. Now where's mine?
Yeah. So what you've seen from January 6th is also
Peanuts
what
in
happened back
comparison
in
of
the
what
Great
happened then.
Depression.
Because that was essentially a slap in the face of veterans and the
Oh
common
yeah.
American.
How
And
could you ever forgive your country after you served your country, watch people die, and they're just going to turn their back on you and not even do what they said
because
that they were
that's
going
the
to do?
way that the system works. It cocoons itself by any means necessary. It will
I just
kill.
don't know how people can just keep putting up with this. I mean, I feel like we're at a crossroads here.
Oh yeah,
Like, I
it's
feel like
important.
people are just like what's going on in France right now. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Well,
Like,
that's
they
what I
even have
said.
the firefighters going in and, and
Right,
doing
and
all the
you have the sanitation guys that aren't
that
picking
aren't
up
working.
that.
Yep.
And now you're starting to feel, and this is where I said like the governments are starting to figure out like, oh shit, like the genie's out of the bottle. How do we
Well,
get it back in the bottle?
this
Well,
is
do the
something that
complete opposite of what you've been doing.
this is also something that Klaus Schwab also predicted in his Great Reset about how, there is going to be unease in the world.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a
He knows what's going on. I mean, like he likes to see chaos like that.
I like to see it too. I mean,
Oh, well, yeah, I like to see people standing up, to have like their personal freedoms not taken away. And that's exactly what's going on right now. It's,
right, it's so blatant. But
yeah.
you have those people that are always hesitant to stand up because they conform to it. Like they really don't know what reality is
Well,
anymore.
they're like they think too much. I'm gonna get fired from my job. I'm not gonna be
Right,
able
but
to
they're
get a
killing
car.
you.
Yeah.
Right. And the more desperate you make people, the less time they have to worry about the next scam you're going to pull on them, right?
Yeah. So it's go
We
time.
said, right. Criminals never change. They just change the mark for who they're going to rip off next, right?
Yeah.
So, back to the France thing, this is where you have fascism. You have the governments coordinating with the media because the media own the governments because they give them all these big giant donations and stuff like that. They own them. Oh, you owe me this favor. You have like everything has been centralized.
Yes.
Always during wartime, wars always happen after crashes because it consolidates. The
Mm-hmm.
bigger companies get bigger by absorbing up all the bad small companies. Even though they were good companies, they still fail because the government never helps them. They always help out the big guys.
Yeah.
So it's like you have a bunch of lions and they just keep killing all the cubs and shit. And the big cub or the big lions just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger because there's all this food for them.
Mm-hmm.
But that always happens after a crash. But
The
this is
corporate media is in, they're trying to depict France. Um,
is
you know,
everything's fine.
well, they're trying to make it seem like that, people are out in the streets because of extra 2 years added onto their work life. It's
Right,
like,
because it's a Ponzi scheme.
yeah.
Yeah,
But I think it's also more than that too. They're just sick of it. They're
right.
sick and
Every
tired of
single
it.
time, and none of the governments, they have always paid pension system. It's a lot of pension systems are constitutionally in the state constitution.
Yeah,
Like,
20 years and out.
yeah, and in my own opinion, it should be illegal for uh, state unions to go on strike. You're not mad and trying to take it out on the corrupt government. You're trying to take it out on the taxpayer, but the taxpayer already paid you to do that. It was squandered, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's always this misdirection, and that's what the media always tries to do. You saw media and governments conform into one during the 1940s and World War II and shit. Propaganda, that's where it all came from.
Yeah.
If you're not with us, you're against us. Rat out the whistleblowers, rat out your name. Even like COVID, remember?
Mm-hmm.
California had this app or something like that where you could report your neighbors for not wearing a mask and shit.
Yep.
It's always during wartime, and wars are always created by bankers because they bet on both sides. Is that the media and shit links up with the governments to downplay everything. But you gotta remember, like in the 30s and 40s, everybody was like broke as shit. Everybody's desperate. Everybody's starving because you had the Dust Bowl on top of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So everybody's desperate and shit. And then all of a sudden, America is attacked. Now everybody can get on board with it, right? Because it's not your fault. You know, we were down in the trenches digging our way out of the hole that, you know, the capitalists and the speculators put us in, but now all of a sudden we're attacked. We're vulnerable. You know, and you always get the, as if you want to put it, the capitalist fascists, that another word for fascism is corporatism,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like at the guys at work, I say, well, you know, like America's fascist and shit, and they're like, no, it isn't. And I said, well, let me ask you this question: do corporations have more rights than you? And they kind of think about it, and they're like, yeah. And I'm like, right. I tell them, like, Roberto Mussolini from Italy was a fascist, and another word for fascism, to quote Roberto Mussolini, is corporatism.
Mm-hmm.
That's why Italy and Germany were thriving as we were in the Great Depression, because essentially Hitler and Mussolini, they weren't even like really politicians. They were just like shit got so bad there, and it's kind of like Trump. Like, this is our last stand as a country. We need an outsider to fucking fix this shit. And it all sounds good, but then all of a sudden it turns that little, well, that's kind of weird, but hopefully it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't escalate. And then it escalates.
Yeah.
But what they did is Hitler and Roberto Mussolini went to all of the CEOs of the big corporations in their countries. And they said, we're going to essentially put our foot on the government's throat because now we're in charge of the government. We're not government officials, so we don't think like government officials. We're going to unleash everything. We're going to deregulate everything, kill as many factory workers as you can. We're getting ready for war and shit because we're due. It's our time. You know, we may have lost World War I and shit like that, and got, you know, but with that World War I was led by corrupt politicians. We're not politicians,
Mm-hmm.
and it gets the people of those countries on board because they're so desperate and destitute, and they give them an opening, right? Ronald Reagan always said it was like America was like the what do you say, the shining star on the hill or some shit like that. Well, that's what Hitler and Mussolini provided. But they kept wages low because that's what the capitalist CEOs and shit like that, the fascist CEOs in those two countries wanted. Because in order for me to ramp up, I need more workers. I need more cheap labor. Okay. So they put price controls on everything kind of and shit. They're like, okay, your wages aren't going up for years and shit. And the CEOs loved it, to the point where the CEOs in Germany and Italy tried to infiltrate the CEO corporations of America and try to get the CEOs of America to get on board and shit. Like, dude, like everything's going good in Italy right now. Everything's going good in Germany right now. Why are you guys in a depression and shit? Oh, because your
Mm-hmm.
government, you know? And that's where you had the confliction with Smedley Butler and the Marines. I think like 100, if I remember right, I read the book like 2 or 3 years ago. I think it was something like maybe 112 soldiers were murdered. I forget how many stormed. Was it the Capitol that they stormed?
I believe so. Yes.
I think it was the Capitol that they stormed. But uh, we were in the middle of the Great Depression. The worst year was like 32. I think it was like 33 or 34 that this shit happened. And because the Marines were all starving to death and shit, and they wanted their fucking money. Like, we put our time
Mm-hmm.
in, like, we're all trained, we'll just overtake your ass, right? So Herbert Hoover was put in a sticky situation. Like, how can the government restore order against the very people that were the government, right? So Herbert Hoover brought out a bunch of U.S. Marshals. I don't know how the hell he convinced them to shoot on Americans, but they did. but I think it was something like 112 people died or some shit like that. I could be way off on that, but I'm pretty sure it was like around 100. But when they started murdering the veterans and shit like that in the streets, Smedley Butler came and like cooled everything down.
General Eisenhower was on the streets killing
Yep.
soldiers,
Yeah.
veterans.
Yep. Because he was a Marine guy. Like you do what you're told. It doesn't screw your morality, screw your empathy. Like it's all about the mission, right?
Yeah, he was literally on the streets.
Yeah.
He was like he wasn't the commander of it, but he was the assistant to the commander.
Yeah. Giving the order.
Yep.
And that's the way that the government and institutions, whether it's hospitals, education, they need complacency. They need order. Yeah, this is illegal, but I'm telling you to do it. That way, if I get caught, I said you did it. Right? And that's why ultimately it just falls apart and shit. But kind of to get back what we were getting at was you're seeing the same thing where China, Russia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, they realize like, okay, like this is the end of the road kind of shit where like they're just going to keep printing money. They're never going to pay us back on our debts. So let's just create a whole new system and fucking cut them out and let them just rot to shit. And I had been saying this for the last couple of years, like making comments on YouTube videos and shit like that. Because you get all these remember over the past like 5 years, but it really blew up over COVID was like drop shipping and shit.
Yeah.
They call it e-commerce arbitrage. Oh, I'm gonna buy shit from Alibaba for $5 or $2, and then I'll sell it on Amazon, my company on Amazon, and I'll sell it for 15 and I'll make pocket $10, right? But that only works in sheer volume. Right? So you have to have large orders, right?
Yeah.
To actually get money. That's why you like on TikTok and shit. You always see, I made $100,000 this month. Right. Well, what was your actual profit? $200. After buying everything and all the shipping costs, I only made $200.
Yes.
You know, my profit was 200, but my revenue was $1 million. And that's what a lot of people don't understand about the difference between revenue and profit. Like, oh, our revenue was like Tesla is a perfect example. Tesla, oh, our revenue was 4 billion. Well, okay, what was your profit? -5, because we lose money on every car. Well, how are you still in business? It's a shell game essentially. We just get stupid investors, and they just keep giving us money, and we can kick the can down the road.
You lose money for what? Every loan that you accept on something that you sell?
Yeah. And that's just it. You are taxed on the money you make, not on the money you lose. That's why Trump is so smart with his taxes and shit. He didn't accept, a wage for being president.
And then he called Hillary out on it right on the floor.
If he didn't pay taxes on the shit, guess what? It would probably get flagged. More people would start diving in and looking in on it, right? But like I said, Trump will never go to jail because Trump's an FBI informant. He's been Donald Trump is the FBI's golden goose.
Yeah.
Everybody around Trump goes to jail except for him. You only see that shit with mob bosses because the mob boss is giving intel about all of his friends, all of his celebrity friends, all of his enemies. Whitey Bulger was a perfect example. Into, like Donald Trump, Whitey Bulger, Sammy the Bull and shit like that. They're all FBI informants. But to them, it's not being a rat. They kill rats, but they're a rat, but to them, they're not a rat. It's more of an alliance, right? They just reword it in their brain. They just rewire it in their head. But, it's kind of like with Trump. Trump will never go to jail because, I kind of figured that maybe he might go to jail once they started raiding this Mar-a-Lago and shit over those documents. I'm like, every president takes fucking documents, right? Like, why is it always specifically Trump and shit? But I knew Trump.
They take documents so they can declassify the documents that they want to keep.
Right, but at the same time, Trump's an arrogant asshole. He don't give two shit. He's just gonna do it, and then I don't know, even though he does know it,
But he's not the only guy that's like that, though. There's a bunch
No,
of Hillary
they all,
Clintons like that.
yeah, but Trump is very direct. The politicians like Hillary and shit, like when they do that same exact shit, they're they do it in a way that makes you not suspect that they're doing, even though that you know that they're doing that kind of shit. They're like, oh well, we went through the protocol of doing it. What's the protocol? I don't know.
Hmm.
You know, and with Trump, he's like, oh, I didn't pack those boxes. Well, who did? I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, well, that's not a good enough excuse either. Well, that's the only one you're gonna get. You know,
Hmm.
he'll be like, well, what'd you find? You know, and
Yeah.
but Trump is also that type of person where he knows like the system is out to get him now because he all governments perceive themselves to be gods,
Hmm.
right? It's kind of like that Thanos theory where like Thanos perceived himself to be like a prophet or a messiah, but then once Tony Stark made him bleed, he was just another fucking person, right?
Hmm.
If it bleeds, we can kill it kind of shit with Predator, you know? Well, that's what Trump did to the system. And it's awoken everybody up, not just other governments of like, oh shit, we got a problem on it. But it's all predicated on the lower tier system, the middle class people, the poor people who've been getting fucked over for the last 70 years, right?
Hmm.
Oh, your pension system, we stole it all. And, what happened? I don't know.
Well, Trump is going to be the front runner for the Republican Party again, and
Yeah, I
it's
hope he
not going to
does.
be DeSantis, especially after it's come out that the Bush, the Bush family is funding, Ron DeSantis's campaign.
Right, because of Jeb Bush.
Well, yeah, Jeb Bush and his brother, the
Well, yeah,
warmonger.
that's just it. Like, Trump threw such a cork. Well, like, you know, I always said this, like people didn't elect Donald Trump. They just didn't want Hillary Clinton. The American people would have voted for a fucking corn dog
I think,
against Hillary Clinton.
I think at that time, America was desperate, and they were beginning to see through all the lies,
Mm-hmm.
and they
Just like the
didn't
German
really,
people.
at that time, Donald Trump, before he ran, he was liked by a lot of people. He was liked by
Right?
Hollywood. He was liked by,
Everybody.
NBC. Yeah, everybody. He told the
He
line
was
along
liked
with
by
everybody
everybody
else.
except the people he did business with.
Hmm.
But that's just it. Like,
Well, that's the thing, that when it comes to money, the guy is not going to be screwed over on, when money is business, business is money. And that's
right. And Trump learned a lot of that crap from his father. You fuck them over before they screw you over. And
yeah.
even if they're not going to screw them over anyways, because they'll more than likely end up doing it anyways, right?
Yeah. But the thing is that, for as rich as the guy is and stuff, like he does, it does seem like, he's like one of the few, like,
That slipped through the cracks.
upperclassmen, the like upper rich class that is down to earth, that
Yeah,
that likes to
even
be around like the people that he does serve, like
yeah,
like it seems like he genuinely appreciates the people that he serves.
right, because they are his shield, as
Hmm.
if you want to put it. It it's a power. Um,
Like
it's a
he knows that he has the power, but
right.
he's humble about having the power. He's not like,
He was at first humble, like
yeah, I
most
mean,
people,
like, when he's provoked, yes, he gets on like his high horse and stuff, but for the most
because
part, around like, like the people that follow him, like his supporters, like yes, he brags about himself a lot, but he
he doesn't.
also he just knows how to touch people, like,
Yeah, he can always he all throughout history there are very few select people that can put their finger on the problem and point out what the
oh,
problem is
Ronald
because
Reagan was
politicians
one of them.
yeah, but Reagan was also one of the worst fucking presidents ever because not a lot of people know this shit, But the most corrupt administration, like they're all corrupt, right? We'll just admit
Mm-hmm.
that. But the only I think it goes in this way, but this is the top three most corrupt ones, where more people in these administrations went to jail than any other fucking administrations.
That's gonna
Okay,
be Trump's administration.
Trump. Second one, Ronald Reagan. Third one,
Nixon.
Nixon.
Mm-hmm.
Nixon. And
Well,
I think, and the fourth one was Hardy back in the early 1920s. And they're all Republican.
exactly. What does that tell you? It tells you that all these bureaucrats and all these, left, liberals, they're all bought and paid for to
Oh,
do
they
this,
all
to
are.
bring down their opponents in whatever way possible. Dirty, it doesn't matter, like your family will get taken care of. Just get this shit done. Get it done.
Right. And that's just it. And,
It's like, and then the Republican Party is just like, oh well, we'll take it on the cheek, but we'll keep moving forward. Well, how much longer are you going to keep taking it on the cheek? When are you
right.
going to start fighting back? When is it going to be, you know, some shit that goes down to like where okay, now everybody's on watch?
Well, this is what we're talking about is that the pitchforks are starting to get sharpened because
Mm-hmm.
you got to remember 2008 was the Titanic hitting the iceberg.
Mm-hmm.
And that whole entire 10 years, or as if you want to fucking put it, all the people that were in charge of the Titanic that worked on the fucking Titanic were all like, okay, we got a huge massive hole in the ship. What do we do? We're out in the middle of nowhere. Help is hours away or days away. What do we do?
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's not cause a panic. Okay, so what do we do? Lie and lie harder. And the sooner we come up with a fake bullshit excuse to explain that giant fucking hole in the thing, it'll calm everybody down and buy us some time. That's what the whole entire ramp up to Donald Trump was. Trump was going around on the Titanic saying there's a fucking hole in the boat.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
saw it. I saw it. I was
Mm-hmm.
on top because I'm an elite, right?
Yeah.
You're all you peasants are at the bottom.
But he's the only voice for the people that would actually make the people's voice somewhat heard.
Right. But at the same time, nobody, and I love Trump supporters and shit like that. I love Biden supporters because you're both fucked. But for me, when I talk to Trump supporters about it and shit like that, and they're like, Trump would have done this shit and he would have done that, had he got reelected. I said, he had 4 years, okay, 4 years. Can we agree on that? Yeah, we'll
Mm-hmm.
agree on that. Okay. Can you name one Democrat that went to jail? Just one. Name fucking one. One.
None. I can't think of any.
No. So what? Like he's saving his 78-year-old energy for the second term to this is going to be his war path now, where he's going to start throwing all these people into jail. You don't understand how the system works. He is
Roger
just
Stone. Roger Stone didn't go to jail, did he?
no. Same with
Michael
Steve
Flynn.
Bannon.
Michael Flynn. He didn't go to. Michael Flynn went to jail, but he was also He was also part of the Obama administration as well.
Yeah, there was a movie called War Machine with Brad Pitt that was kind of predicated on Flynn, I think.
Yeah.
But that was a great movie to explain how it's just a big giant bureaucracy. I highly recommend that movie War
Well,
Machine.
that's all it is. That's
Yeah,
that's all it is. You just gotta, as soon as you become, the executive chairman, the president of the United States, your administration has to toe the line with the bureaucrats.
hmm
The bureaucrats have been
don't
keeping, you're opening a new chapter in the book. And as far as the bureaucrats you know, that book's been open for a while and they're just flying through pages.
hmm
So they
Well,
go in there and
just
they just
wait you
tell you
out.
how it's going to be.
They'll wait you out. The
Hmm.
best is 4 years. The worst is 8 years.
And
Okay.
an example of that would be back when COVID started and Dr. Fauci came out and all these restrictions came out. Donald Trump was dealing with something that he had no idea about what
He's a
coronavirus is.
germaphobe.
Nobody
Trump's a huge,
knew. And so, Trump being put in that position didn't have a choice. He had to toe the line. So when there were restrictions, there was restrictions.
hmm
It's all the work of the bureaucrats.
yeah.
The
And
bureaucrats run the country. It's
but
not the executive branch that, I mean, they're just a puppet. That's all
and
they are.
right, and that was Trump's time to shine, and it was very simple for him to do. Show some empathy. Hey, everybody, just put on a mask for a fucking couple of months. Let's get through this shit, and we'll go right back on track. But when he's like telling people to put fucking bleach in them, and it was, to me personally, it was like, you just killed a couple of idiots, though. But that's probably a
Yeah.
good thing, though. But what I'm getting at is that the reason why he was so complacent with it all of them were. The only people that
Is
really
because
went,
everything was going well. The economy was the best it's ever been.
it wasn't. It was breaking down. I say this again.
Well,
That's
that's the
this
way
is why
that
Trump was complacent with the whole entire COVID shit. This is why he knew it wasn't as bad as it was, but he knew that like underlying the banking system collapsed.
if he didn't do something, he would
Right.
probably lose support.
It's it's not that he at that point America was so divided and so fucking dumbed down. It's kind of like you're racking up a credit card and you're telling your wife, "Hey, honey, look how good we're doing. We're getting all this extra shit," and she's like, "How do we afford this?" "Oh, don't worry about it."
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, at the end of the month, you get a $30,000 credit card bill. That's all Trump was doing. But
hmm
at the same time, when I hear people say like the economy was doing better than it is now, it's like, well, unemployment's at 3.4. It was there, same at his. The
hmm
problem was that all that inflation was going into the stock market. And then once the stock market falls, it flushes it out like a big giant fucking umbrella. All that excess money goes into common goods that everyday Americans use, the
I
middle class.
think economically, I think America needs to answer or ask itself this question. What does America bring to the table to the world?
Debt,
Economically, what do we bring?
debt and
We
hatred.
have nothing. We've given it all away. We've given it, we've sold it all to China. We've all of
You've
our
given it all
phones.
away willingly.
Yes.
Don't forget that word willingly.
And
Willingly.
also to put the cherry on top, for the sake of, global warming, you won't even produce oil.
Yeah.
And you're one of the most you're one of the oil rich nations in the world.
Well, the reason why they're trying to do this green initiative shit is because they know we're going to fucking war. Who owns all the oil? Saudi Arabia and Iran.
hmm
We have West Texas. I think that's right around like $75 right now, I think. But crude is Iran and Saudi Arabia, I think. They
Yeah.
both got crude.
And
Same with
so
Venezuela.
Germany, I believe Germany said that they want the pipeline back up and going. The
Because they get
pipeline,
all of their energy from fucking
yes,
Russia.
yes, it's very crucial. Well, it comes from Russia into Germany throughout all of Europe.
hmm And
And the thing is if this World War III does kick off, then it's just going to be a big boost for America because eventually they're going to have to say, all right, well, they do need energy over there. And so then we're going to have to start exporting our energy over to Western Europe to supply them, along with weapons. And
everybody needs to sacrifice even more than you already. Oh, you got a penny left? Let's cut that fucker in
yeah,
half.
so yeah, the
And
more I talk to you about it, the more I can see
you
how
can
it's going to
see
play
it,
out.
right. It's like a game of chess.
hmm
The pawns are all moving around, and then all of a sudden the queen comes out. Uh-oh, what the fuck is going on here?
Yes.
And back to the whole entire Alibaba and the e-commerce arbitrage shit that so many fucking fake Americans, fake companies that these idiot Americans got hooked on. Like
hmm
you see it all the time in advertisements on YouTube, TikTok. I made $1 million and shit by e-commerce arbitrage and shit like that. Well, where do all of these fucking fake ass companies get all of their shit from?
Mm-hmm.
Alibaba. It's all in China. So all the China with one phone call, the Chinese government with one phone call can collapse America. It can collapse Amazon. All it says is, hey, Alibaba, you're no longer selling that shit to Americans. Cut them off. You're no
Mm-hmm.
longer allowed. Sell it to our own Chinese people. We can use those goods. What
Yep.
happens? Where's my shipment? I got all these customers that paid. We're not giving it to you no more. Make
Mm-hmm.
it yourself.
Yep.
Uh,
Oh, we don't have factories for that
right.
anymore.
What was it? 90% of the pharmaceuticals are made in China. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if you're at war, don't you need that shit?
Mm-hmm.
We
Yeah.
gave everything away, and now they're trying to make everybody so desperate that they'll fall in line. Oh, you
That
want
also
to
makes sense as into why they want to build that, what is it, like a microprocessor plant or now Ohio or something like that.
some shit
What the
like that? Won't matter.
whatever it is that they had in Taiwan,
You should have been doing
those
that 10
chips or
years ago.
whatever. I think they want to do that in Ohio now so that they can, you know, do that for the sake of, building their
Right.
weapons.
But don't you think it's a little ironic that there has been so much concentration of wiping out small companies and the bigger companies taking over and getting bailed out? Okay, a perfect example was during COVID, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
not a lot of people remember this shit, but because I like history so much, they did the same thing in the 1930s. You may have saw videos of it where farms were dumping millions of gallons of milk into their fields, destroying crops.
Mm-hmm.
They were destroying the supply in order to meet the demand. They did the same thing in the 1930s. Well, don't
But
we have like food shortages now?
I also remember during COVID, the CEOs of multiple companies, multiple critical companies like Walmart, Target, and them going to the White House to sit down with President Trump, pretty much saying that, we are going to remain open throughout this pandemic. And then all the mom and pop shops were shut down
Right.
and they couldn't operate
Because
because they
essentially,
couldn't make it. They didn't get the invitation to the White House.
no, not even that. This is all planned. They did the same shit in the 1930s. In order to go to war, you have to destroy the little guys and suck up their
But
resources.
that's what it is, though. That's
Yeah.
what makes you the little guy, is not having that invitation to the White House, the seat at the table.
Yeah, that's what made Joe the plumber with fucking Obama so popular. Or Joe the plumber and shit.
Yeah.
So you're a socialist, right? He goes right now, "Obama, you're a socialist, right?" He's like, no, 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 Joe.
I'm gonna YouTube that later.
Yeah, Joe the plumber and shit. He's like, I just want to know, how are you gonna screw me over, right? The economy took a shit. You just bailed out the banks that did this all. And so how are you gonna screw me over now? Universal health care. You
Hmm.
know? Uh, and that's what I mean. It's blatantly obvious to some of us what's going on and what's going to happen. That's why they're trying to bring the draft and shit like that. Like, they're trying to get people mentally prepared. But as I said before, in order to slaughter sheep, you have to herd them into a pen. And this is kind of where the banking crisis is going on right now, where you're having these small community banks. There's a run on all of them, right? There's bank runs going on, but the media isn't covering it, just like they don't want to cover France because it'll just throw more gasoline on the fire.
Hmm.
So these regional banks, I was kind of thinking about this at work today because like guy at work that he knows that I like finance and shit like that, and he was like, "What's up? You look like you're in the zone kind of." And I'm like, "No, I'm trying to figure something out right now in my head." And later on, I came to him because I've been trying to like figure this out of what the banks are doing right now
Hmm.
because there's a banking crisis going on, but the stock market is steady. the stock market should be shedding 5,000 points right now.
Mm-hmm.
The banks are the lifeblood of the economy. If you can't get credit to fund your store, this is kind of why the whole economy collapsed during COVID, because we're on this like on-time inventory system. Because everything needs to be fresh, because if it's fresh, you can charge more. So everything has like a 30-day shelf life.
Yeah.
So, and then they rotate all the groceries and shit. That's why everything is algorithmic now. Oh, we sold 5 apples. It's the winter now. Nobody likes apples kind of shit. Let's tone it down a little bit.
Yeah.
So everything in America is on this on-time demand. But once you disrupt that, the whole system collapses. But the same shit kind of goes with the banks. When the banks are on this, the whole entire debt system and finance system is revolved around paying off a debt. Somebody gives you money, you have to go work your ass off, or somebody has to go work a job and then pay you so you can go pay somebody else off.
Yeah.
Well, when you stop or shut down the ability to service that debt and pay your bills, the whole shit collapses over.
Circulation stops.
Exactly. So the ability to service your debt collapses.
And that's the thing, is we can't have circulation slow down in order to keep the economy moving.
You have to keep it just going just right. Okay. Now this is the scary part.
Mm-hmm.
All hyperinflation throughout history has primarily happened after wars.
Mm-hmm.
Because we keep having to spend that. It's like a black hole or a dumpster fire. You guys got to keep printing money, putting it to the banks give it to the contractors, and it works its way through the economy kind of by paying off the contractors' employees and shit like that. You're still getting money through the system, but at the same time, you're exporting a lot of the inflation overseas.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we just ended the war in Afghanistan, pissed away $10 trillion on that, destroyed all those military vehicles. Well, why would we do that? Well, so we can print more money to build more.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't make any sense, because that $10 trillion that you spent on a war effort, you're not getting back. You're just accumulating more debt.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's print more money to accumulate more debt and drive up the cost of living for everybody back home.
Everybody else. And it's just like, you ever have like a tarp full of water and shit, and then you try to wring it out, and all of a sudden, or you poke a hole in it, and all of a sudden it just comes splashing out on the picnic table below it or some shit? That's what's happened. When COVID hit, all that inflation that was in the stock market and bond markets dropped out, and now it went all in the common goods area. But this is the scary part now, because like I was telling guys at work and stuff, like this is you just saw a $200 billion bank collapse in 2 days.
Yeah.
Think of it as hyperinflation can kick off in 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
That's how quickly it can go. And the average American isn't ready for that, because the common person's mindset is in now. They never think they have a hard time thinking about bad things happening, which is exactly why they always underestimate them happening.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so like hyperinflation can kick off in 2 fucking weeks, and the government will start to realize like, oh shit, like it's out in the open now. Like all that money printing now is, people have realized now, like if prices keep going up, I got to get my paycheck. As soon as I get my paycheck, I pay my bills, and then I go and buy a bunch of shit that I need. But not only that, I buy more than what I need, because if I'm going to need it, I know the price is going to go up. And it's like a feedback loop where it just keeps going on itself.
Mm-hmm.
The hyperinflation in the Weimar Republic was building for like 10 years.
Yeah.
It was building for 10 years. And then after World War I happened, all of a sudden, like you started to see this kind of like collapse in Germans manufacturing and shit like that. They had a Treaty of Versailles, they had to pay for all that. So they had all these liabilities and war reparations that they had to pay for. But the economy collapsed due to the war. So from like 1920 to 24, that's when the velocity of money really fucking picked up.
Mm-hmm.
Because the government just kept printing money, but there was no supply of any goods because there was war. Like the whole thing was decimated, but they had to pay all this shit.
Mm-hmm.
That's how quickly hyperinflation can hit. So if you see a $200 billion bank, I was just watching shit on it on Silicon Valley, which is, I find it so fascinating about this whole banking crisis is how the government and the media are trying to create tunnel vision on Silicon Valley Bank. But why did the other banks fail?
Mm-hmm.
Silvergate, they said, failed because it was into crypto. Signature Bank said that it failed because it was into crypto. That's bullshit.
They really failed because their chief compliance officers suck.
Not even that. They're all in on it. They loaned out way too much money and they're supposed to have reserves. But guess what? Like Silicon Valley,
They use their reserves to buy what was it?
treasuries.
Bonds, right?
Yeah,
Or
treasury
yeah,
bonds.
yeah.
So they bought all these bonds at like 2%, and now it's 5%. Well, you just lost, like, you're at 70 cents on the dollar. It's
Yeah.
something called mark to market accounting. Enron, we talked about this kind of before. Enron did the same shit.
Yeah.
If the market's doing good, you can say next year, oh, you're going to double your profit because the market
Yeah.
now is predicated on the market tomorrow or some shit like that. You know
And
what I
it's
mean?
just as much the government's fault for flaunting it out there to buy it.
Yep. And essentially, it was a bailout of billionaires. I just saw something where 13 billion in Silicon Valley was owned by like 10 Chinese people. So it had the American taxpayers just bailed out Chinese
Billionaires.
people, billionaires. And this is where I said before, the government, the media are trying to contain it, but it's like pushing a beach ball underwater. Like you can hold it there, but eventually your arms are gonna fucking get weak, and eventually the shit's gonna blow up.
Yeah. It's almost like the bureaucrats sit on the throne of the one world republic, you know?
Right, and this is why they're gonna try to, as I said, in order to slaughter sheep or whatnot, you have to herd them into a pen. So what's going on right now is there's bank runs on community banks, your local one right up the corner or whatnot, that
Mm-hmm.
70 to 80% of your car loans, your commercial real estate, small businesses and plazas and stuff like that, your credit cards, even some of your private student loans, all fucking community banks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now that everybody has started to realize, like, wait a minute, like all these community banks, it's not the fact that it's just treasuries and this market to market shit. They said something like there's over $1 trillion of unrealized losses in the banking system. That's bullshit. There's like 70 trillion
Mm-hmm.
if you include all the derivatives and side bets on it.
Mm-hmm.
There's not enough money. Like the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, literally just collapsed because of one bank.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Because they had to bail out the depositors at SVB.
right, it was a $200 billion bank. Okay, get this shit. In one day, 40 billion left. I think that was on Thursday. That's what drew off this big giant red flag in the banking system. Somebody pulled out 16 billion. Who? Somebody just pulled out 30 billion. You know, and all of a sudden you're like, well, what the fuck is going on? You know?
Yeah.
And they said, because I was reading on it and I was, because I find this shit fascinating. So like on Thursday, that's why it collapsed so quickly. $200 billion bank market cap. They probably had only about 150 billion worth of assets, if that.
Mm-hmm.
But it was all dog shit probably.
Yeah.
So you had the tech sector falling last year, and these companies that don't make any money were burning through cash. So they are burning through twice as much now because they're fake zombie companies, Roblox and shit like that. They're all fake companies.
Mm-hmm.
They don't make a fucking profit, but yet they burn through so much cash. So they were burning through cash. They burned through half of it, and then the other half, the bank invested in a bunch of shitty government bonds that it couldn't get off of its books. And the only way they could give the people fleeing the company or the tech companies that wanted more cash was to sell that shit at a loss. So essentially, you're just insolvent at that point. Well, the FDIC insurance collapsed that day. The FDIC only has 125 or 128 billion in its fund.
Mm-hmm.
That's supposed to like bail out small mom and pop banks.
Yeah.
That's why they take them overnight and shit like that. Oh, you have your bank is worth 500 million. Okay, cool, no problem. All the deposit, but you get a 200 billion-dollar bank, and you only have 125 billion to bail out.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why there was like the shotgun wedding with that one. That I just looked at the stock in 2021. Silicon Valley's stock price was like $780. I
A
looked. It was like
share?
a share, $780.
Wow.
That's from all the money printing, right? The Cantillon effect I was talking about before.
Mm-hmm.
They print the money, they give it to the banks give it to their buddies because they have collateral.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to give it to fucking some stupid Joe Schmo who's $100,000 in student loan debt. No, they're going to give it to a giant corporation that doesn't make any fucking money and shit like that. And the ripple effect of it, right? So it was 780 a share or some shit like that. It went all the way down to like 13 cents. You look at the shit, it just literally just nosedives. Well, that's how quickly like shit is gonna be hitting the fucking fan. I said this to the guys at work because they know me and how like I think and just the way that I know finance and stuff like that and Bitcoin and crypto and stuff. They're like, so what? Like, how bad is this shit gonna get? I said, look, you got a gun? They're like, they're like, well, what do you mean? And I said, look,
Resident Evil type shit.
I'm gonna say this very, very like politely. If you do not have your shit in order by August, going into September, what you're seeing going on in France right now, it'll be like that, but with guns. Like, imagine pensioners with fucking guns and shit going to the companies and governments and being like, where's our fucking money?
Mm-hmm.
We worked our ass, and then, like I said, this is the trifecta. You have all these baby boomers that invested into the system,
Mm-hmm.
just like the Marines in the 1930s. And then all of a sudden, here comes your payday, and whoop.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, could you imagine being 60, 65? Most baby boomers are only working for the healthcare because healthcare is so out of, you can't pay for shit, right?
Yeah.
This is where I say, like, you think what's going on in France is bad? Picture that shit with guns. They're not allowed guns in France. So just imagine the fucking chaos that will come when the pension systems will start to go bust, and it'll be like a domino effect kind of. Pension systems, insurance companies. Who was writing all of those bonds? Oh, the government was. So they're broke,
Mm-hmm.
right? And this is where everybody starts to look around and it's like, so wait, the broke guy bails out the broker guy, and then the even broker guy, he needs to bail out the broke guy. So you're all broke.
Mm-hmm.
Well, just give us time. We'll figure it out. And this is where you can get like a collapse in 2 days, is because everybody, the herd, as if you want to put it, they start to realize, you know what? Yeah, FDI, my insurance and my bank account is, insured up to 250,000, but uh, what happens if everybody just gets scared? Right? And that's what they say. Like I told you, I texted you, go to the fucking bank, go get some cash out, leave the bare fucking minimum in there, as much as you need to pay your bills to
Mm-hmm.
get you through. Anything extra than that, you should be buying some extra food, some extra shit, because if you're 65 fucking years, and like I said before, this is where the government knows all of this is going to happen. Over the summer, it'll be kind of tampered down a little bit. because the real shit's going to hit the fan in the fall. Because as one domino falls, the government is essentially kind of like pushing all this fake paper money at the next domino to try to keep it propped up.
Do you think it's
As
gonna
it,
be like some White House, what is it, White House Down
yeah,
movie
like
type stuff?
the North Koreans take over and hold them hostage.
Yeah.
But as I said before, they're, what's going on is there's a
Oh,
financial.
there's Frank.
Hey,
What's up,
Frank,
Frank? What's up, Frank? That's the man, Frank.
how old is he?
I think he's 5.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, he's cool.
he pay rent.
I wanna get him a set of like eyeglasses and then like like a dress shirt with a tie.
Get him a Hawaiian shirt.
Yeah.
Or get him a Hawaiian shirt with those. Remember those old dinosaur glasses where like they had the hologram in them?
Yeah. I seen like a video of a cat driving a Tesla on autopilot with
Yeah, I saw
glasses
that.
and a dress
Why should
shirt.
dogs have all the fun or something?
Yeah.
You remember that skit in SNL where it was always the cat driving?
Yeah.
I forget what it is. But this is what I said. Like that all. So if you're a large corporation or whatnot, and you got over $250,000, you're not insured. Like
Yep.
that's kind of what happened with all these companies. They're like, oh, it's insured up to 250. We're a company. We have more than that.
Hmm.
So I can't make my payroll. So I'm bankrupt. Now I got to lay off 3,000 people. And you could see how the cascading effect can happen, right? Right
Hmm.
before an election, just like 2007, 2008. They're trying, all the bureaucrats don't want to back down because they all got to get reelected, right?
Hmm.
So it just turns into this big, giant, stupid blame game. Biden spending all this money. Well, Trump spent all this money too.
And then
The
the
cat
people
seems,
say, screw this, and then it becomes a bloodbath.
yeah, and this is where you're gonna get your Marie Antoinette kind of let them eat cake kind of shit.
Hmm.
There's a crisis. You fucking politicians need to come together and solve this problem. This is why you're in these positions. And
Hmm.
just like on the Titanic, you're gonna get the guys who are like, I have a child. You know?
Did you watch the Waco documentary on Netflix?
No, I don't have Netflix and shit, but I've watched plenty of them on them.
Oh, you should have seen Chuck Schumer's take back then to now. Wow. What a that guy's a com that guy is a completely different person.
Oh yeah.
That guy goes from wow, that was federal overreach what they did to those people in Waco.
Hmm.
So now it's like January 6th, this is the worst day in democracy.
Yeah. Kick down people's doors and jab them and shit and hold
Yeah.
them down. Use the military to hold people down and jab them. You
Mhm.
know?
Yeah.
Because it's not what they don't listen to what they say, watch what they do. And if they're bought and paid for by oil corporation, what do you think they're going to say? Drill. Oh, you
The
don't
only
drink the water
Democrat
though.
the only Democrat that I've seen that really hasn't changed is that Robert F. Kennedy.
Hmm.
He's a
Yeah,
Democrat, but he is like an old school Democrat. I don't even consider Joe Manchin an old school Democrat. He's a moron.
right. They all just play the game.
Yeah.
Oh, we're losing. Oh, I'm
Uh,
switching teams.
What do you think about Biden becoming, running for reelection? I will have to
That's not
think about
important right
that.
now because that's a
Yeah,
year away. I want to talk about Ukraine and
yeah.
how we're going to prop up their pension system while ours is collapsing. Does that make sense? Well, let me give you a little bit more detail. Fuck yourself.
Hmm.
You're a taxpayer. Fuck you.
Or somebody like Mitch McConnell that's all like, oh, the Republicans, they should be about the war efforts in Ukraine. Yeah, idiot. No, it just goes to show you how attentive you are to your party, you moron. Nobody cares about them.
Well, I don't know about any of our listeners, but I kind of like picked up this pattern where every single time America goes into the shitter, either some little white girl gets kidnapped or like gets lost in the wilderness for some fucking odd reason in today's technology driven economy, or there's a school shooting of some kind.
Yeah.
Okay, like why is there always this tandem? Watch next week some white girl goes missing or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dave Chappelle talked about this in one of his specials. Like, you ever notice that? Like, hey, the whole entire weapons of mass destruction, Mr. Bush, is kind of falling apart. We're gonna need to come up with something. What do you do? He calls up like Michael Jackson. He's
Mm-hmm.
like, "Hey, Mike, come and meet us down at the White House." Mike, as you know, the war hasn't been going our way, and there's no easy way to tell me this, but we're gonna need you to jerk off another kid, Mike. I really am sorry. It would really help out. So I'm just being, I don't want to be like some sort of like prophet or anything, but I got a feeling that all of a sudden some white girl's gonna go missing or some shit, or like we're gonna have another Jared from Subway moment where like some like
Holy cow.
you
What a
know
coincidence, dog, because after I get done doing the show with you, I was gonna go and watch that. They had like some documentary on Jared Fogle that came
yeah,
out.
yeah, he's this big giant perv and shit.
Yeah, I was gonna watch that with my wife.
They're all in on it. I mean that like it's very hard for somebody like me who loves history and stuff. Like this has been going on for centuries. Like this elitist class, when you have so much money and shit, you and all the power, you could care less about money anymore. What's the difference between 50 million and 51 million? Yeah, a million, but to you, you're just kind of like, I don't give a shit. You there? Hello.